You won't believe what happened inside the hallowed walls of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County Courthouse. In a shocking display of arrogance, a seasoned police officer planted a swift kick on the leg of an unsuspecting man, a highly trained and decorated black Navy SEAL. Can you imagine the audacity of such an act in a place where justice is supposed to reign? The room erupted in gasps. Reporters, spectators, and even the stoic judge froze in astonishment. But what came next was more jaw-dropping than anyone could have predicted. Stay with Dark Stories to uncover the moment that turned the tables and redefined justice. In a single, decisive moment, justice found a new shape, one that no one in that courtroom would soon forget. Stay tuned for the full story on Dark Stories. It was a crisp autumn morning in Charlotte, North Carolina. The sun had barely risen, its soft rays filtering through the golden leaves of the towering oaks lining the street. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg County Courthouse stood in stoic grandeur, its limestone facade gleaming faintly. A faint drizzle fell, creating little dark spots on the worn steps leading inside. People milled about with subdued chatter, the air thick with anticipation for the day's proceedings. Standing outside the courthouse was Marcus Grant, a tall, muscular black man in his late 30s, wearing a neatly pressed gray suit. The only hint of his storied military background was the subtle pin on his lapel, a small gold trident. Marcus had served with distinction as a United States Navy SEAL for over a decade, completing multiple deployments in hostile territories. Despite his formidable resume, he was an unassuming presence, quiet, respectful, and calm. Marcus was there as a witness for a friend, Michael Lane, whose family had become embroiled in a property dispute. Michael had once saved Marcus's life by donating blood after a severe training accident at sea. Now Marcus was determined to support his friend in this legal battle. It never crossed Marcus's mind that in a few hours, he would become the central figure in an explosive, life-altering incident. By 9 a.m., a queue began forming at the security checkpoint. Dressed in formal attire and feeling the eyes of strangers upon him, Marcus calmly emptied his pockets for the metal detector. A well-built police officer with broad shoulders and a sharply creased uniform stood by, barking orders at the crowd. He was Officer Brad Mitchell, notorious within the courthouse for his harsh demeanor and an impatience that teetered on the brink of aggression. Mitchell's buzz-cut and piercing gaze gave off an unmistakable aura of intimidation. As Marcus approached, Mitchell held out his hand sharply. "ID and any electronics," he snapped. Marcus politely handed over his driver's license and placed his phone in the tray. Mitchell's eyes flicked from the ID to Marcus and then down to the small Navy SEAL pin. The corner of Mitchell's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "Military?" Mitchell asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus responded quietly. "Huh," Mitchell grunted, handing back Marcus's ID. That single exchange, though brief, bristled with unspoken tension. Mitchell waved him on, and Marcus passed through the metal detector without incident. He collected his belongings, nodded politely, and went on his way. Meanwhile, Michael Lane stood by the elevators, anxiously shifting from foot to foot. He brightened upon seeing Marcus. "Thank you so much for coming," Michael said, his voice tinged with relief. Marcus offered a reassuring smile. "I told you I'd be here. Let's settle this once and for all." They entered the elevator together, the clang of the doors echoing in the stark marble lobby. Marcus tried to calm his friend, who was stewing in anxiety about the upcoming hearing. But from the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed Officer Mitchell step into a neighboring elevator. For some strange reason, Mitchell kept his gaze fixed on Marcus, almost challenging him. Marcus dismissed it as mere curiosity, a harmless reaction to seeing a large, fit black man wearing a distinctive military pin. But was it really harmless, or was something darker brewing? Keep watching Dark Stories to find out. Little did Marcus know that gaze foreshadowed the tumultuous events about to unfold. The courtroom itself was a solemn space with high ceilings, dark wooden pews for seating, and a raised bench for the presiding judge. Light filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. Marcus sat beside Michael while their respective attorneys approached the bench to discuss preliminary matters. As proceedings began, a hush fell over the room. Judge Catherine Baldwin, a middle-aged woman with a careful expression, presided with an air of authority, her gavel resting lightly in her hand. She examined documents in front of her, occasionally adjusting her black-rimmed glasses. To the surprise of many, Officer Mitchell entered the courtroom, his uniform still immaculate. He stood along the back wall, arms folded, eyes scanning the crowd like a sentry on duty. Usually, courthouse security officers stayed outside in the halls or at their assigned stations. The presence of Mitchell inside the courtroom was unusual, to say the least. Was he there on official business, or something else? At first, Marcus barely noticed him. He was intent on offering moral support to Michael and preparing to testify if necessary. The hearing progressed in a typical fashion, both sides arguing over property boundaries, old surveys, and conflicting witness statements. Tension rose as the opposing attorney, a sharp-tongued woman in a navy suit named Miss Elizabeth Crane, tried to paint Michael's family as opportunistic, but Marcus's friend remained composed, buoyed by having someone as steadfast as Marcus at his side. During a short recess, Marcus stepped into the aisle to stretch his legs. That was when he again caught sight of Officer Mitchell, who seemed to be staring at him from across the room. Marcus couldn't help but feel the scrutiny. He offered a polite nod, a nonverbal greeting, but Mitchell's stare remained cold, bordering on hostile. Marcus looked away, deciding not to make an issue of it. The last thing anyone needed was unnecessary drama in a courthouse, of all places. Yet fate had a different plan that day. When the hearing resumed, Judge Baldwin asked Marcus to take the stand as a character witness. Dressed in his neat suit, Marcus walked confidently to the witness box. He placed a hand on a worn Bible, swearing to tell the truth. A hush fell over the courtroom as Miss Crane began her cross-examination. "Mr. Grant," she said, pacing deliberately, "you are a retired Navy SEAL. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied. "You served in multiple combat zones?" "Yes, I did." "And you were honorably discharged 2 years ago?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Miss Crane's eyes narrowed. "You're aware that violence is never the solution to disputes, correct?" Marcus bit back a retort, letting the question hang for a moment. He knew exactly what Miss Crane was aiming for, to paint him as some kind of hot-headed soldier prone to aggression. "Yes, ma'am," he finally answered. "Violence in a civilian context is never my first resort. My training is about discipline and respect for the rule of law." No sooner had the words left Marcus's mouth than a small commotion drew everyone's attention to the back of the courtroom. Officer Mitchell had moved from his spot by the wall, striding toward the front. Judge Baldwin looked up, confusion spreading across her face. "Officer Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying in the silent courtroom, "is there an issue?" Mitchell paused in the center aisle. "I'm just doing my job, Your Honor," he said in an even tone, making sure everything is secure. "Then I would suggest you do so from the back," Judge Baldwin replied pointedly. "We have no disruptions here." There was a beat of hesitation before Mitchell replied, "Understood," and stepped back, but his glare was fixed on Marcus like a laser. Although the exchange was brief, the tension in the room spiked. Miss Crane continued her questioning, attempting to rattle Marcus, but found him composed, polite, and resolute. By the time Marcus stepped down from the witness stand, it was clear his testimony had been effective. Michael's case appeared to be in a strong position. But what explosive moment was about to shatter this calm? Stay tuned to Dark Stories for the shocking twist. Little did anyone expect that in the next hour, the legal procedure would be overshadowed by a shocking act of violence, one that would test the boundaries of justice in a place where law was supposed to reign supreme. After Marcus's testimony, the court recessed for lunch. People filtered out of the room in hushed groups, discussing the morning's events and speculating on how the case might end. Marcus joined Michael and their legal team at a nearby diner, a place called Eddie's Grill, just across the street from the courthouse. The ambient noise of clinking silverware and murmured conversations helped them decompress from the morning's tension. Michael seemed more at ease. "Your testimony was spot on," he said, taking a bite of his sandwich. "You really helped push back against Miss Crane's accusations." Marcus offered a small smile. "I hope so. She's tough, but I think the truth is on our side." Their attorney, a soft-spoken yet sharp-eyed man named Kenneth Sawyer, nodded. "We've done well. With any luck, the judge will see through the opposing side's attempt to paint your family in a bad light." Despite the congenial atmosphere, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of Officer Mitchell's piercing stare. Something about the way the man had marched down the courtroom aisle felt like more than mere security protocol. It was as though Mitchell had singled out Marcus as a potential threat, someone he had to keep under close watch. Michael noticed the frown creasing Marcus's brow. "You okay?" Marcus hesitated before responding. "That officer, Mitchell, I think is his name. He's watching me like a hawk. I can't figure out why." Kenneth cleared his throat. "I've heard rumors about him being particularly hard on certain groups of people. There have been complaints, but nothing's ever stuck." Michael grimaced. "Just keep your distance, man. The last thing you need is trouble with an officer of the law." Marcus nodded, trying to brush aside the uneasy feeling. "I will." They finished their lunch and made their way back to the courthouse, weaving through the throng of people returning for the afternoon sessions. By the time they reached their assigned courtroom, the hallway was packed with attorneys, clients, and more than a few onlookers. Through the crowd, Marcus spotted Mitchell again. The officer was off to one side, leaning against a pillar, seemingly lost in thought. But as soon as Marcus stepped into view, Mitchell straightened, his gaze locking onto Marcus. Marcus felt his gut tighten. He inhaled deeply, reminded himself to remain calm, and walked past without giving Mitchell a second glance. A part of him wanted to confront the officer, to ask what his problem was, but that was exactly the sort of confrontation Marcus had spent his life avoiding since returning from service. At precisely 1:30 p.m., Judge Baldwin resumed court. The room filled quickly, and the property dispute hearing continued. More exhibits were introduced, and Miss Crane tried once again to undermine Michael's credibility. Marcus noticed that Officer Mitchell had returned to his post at the back, arms folded, his expression closed off. With each passing minute, the tension in the courtroom felt as though it was building towards some invisible breaking point. Marcus, once again seated behind Michael's attorney, tried to focus on the proceedings, but every so often, his eyes flicked to Mitchell, who seemed to be inching forward row by row as the hearing progressed. Marcus's instincts, a combination of military training and simple common sense, told him something was very wrong. Then it happened. Just after Michael's mother finished giving her emotional testimony, Miss Crane requested a moment to consult with her client. Judge Baldwin granted a short recess. People rose from their seats, conversing in hushed tones. Marcus stood, turning to speak with Kenneth, only to find that Officer Mitchell was now standing within a foot of him. "Got a problem?" Mitchell asked in a low, gruff voice, the tension between them now tangible. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "No," he said calmly. "I'm just here for my friend's case." Mitchell's jaw muscles flexed. "You think you're some kind of hero because you were a SEAL?" Marcus inhaled slowly, maintaining control. He recognized intimidation tactics when he saw them. "I'm just a man trying to do what's right." Mitchell took a step closer, their eyes locked. "We'll see about that," the officer muttered before turning and heading toward the judge's bench, presumably to speak with one of the court staff. Marcus remained rooted in place, unsettled but determined not to escalate. By now, the entire courtroom was abuzz. A few other spectators shot concerned glances at Mitchell and Marcus, sensing the hostility. Kenneth approached Marcus quietly. "What's going on?" Marcus shook his head. "Nothing good." He glanced at the clock on the wall. The recess was nearly over. "Let's just get through this hearing." But fate had other plans. In a matter of minutes, an event so shocking would occur, it would eclipse any legal argument in the courthouse that day. What could push this tense situation over the edge? Don't miss the explosive moment on Dark Stories, The hearing resumed, and Miss Crane resumed her cross-examination of Michael's mother. Tensions were high, but the proceedings went on without major disruptions until a moment of confusion erupted near the back of the room. Someone shouted, "Get back," followed by a clatter of chairs. All heads turned. There was Officer Mitchell, pushing his way through a row of seated onlookers with what looked like a mix of aggression and desperation. The abrupt action caused an older man to stumble and nearly fall. Judge Baldwin's gavel slammed down once. "Officer Mitchell, explain yourself." Mitchell pointed. "He's got a weapon," he barked, his gaze fixed on a random bystander who looked utterly baffled. Instantly, the courtroom erupted into chaos. People scrambled to get away from the supposed threat. The bystander, a middle-aged man, held up empty hands, protesting that he had nothing on him. It took only moments for others to notice that he was indeed unarmed. Judge Baldwin stood, her voice rising. "Everyone, remain calm." Mitchell spun around, disoriented, as though he realized there was no actual weapon. The tension soared to a boiling point. Anxious murmurs filled the air. The older man Mitchell had nearly knocked over was helped upright by a woman in the gallery, shaking his head in disbelief. Marcus watched this unfold, his heart pounding. Clearly, Mitchell had made a mistake or was intentionally creating a scene. The entire room was in an uproar, with people shouting over each other. In the midst of the pandemonium, Mitchell's eyes once again locked onto Marcus. Suddenly, with everyone watching, Mitchell strode toward Marcus in a rage. "You think this is a joke?" he snarled, pointing a finger in Marcus's face. Marcus held his hands up, palms open, a non-threatening posture. "Officer, I don't know what you're talking about. You said someone had a weapon, but clearly, shut up," Mitchell roared, drawing the attention of every soul in the courtroom. Judge Baldwin's voice rang out. "Officer Mitchell, that's enough. Stand down." But Mitchell seemed beyond reason. His face was twisted in fury, and adrenaline pulsed through his veins. It was as if something inside him snapped. In one swift movement, Mitchell pivoted on his heel and delivered a vicious kick directly to Marcus's shin, so fast that many didn't fully register what had happened until Marcus staggered backward, pain shooting up his leg. A collective gasp reverberated through the courtroom. Journalists and onlookers fumbled for their phones, capturing the shocking moment on camera. In an instant, the front row parted like the Red Sea as people tried to distance themselves from the confrontation. Judge Baldwin shouted, "Officer Mitchell, stand down immediately." Her voice trembled, a mix of anger and disbelief. Marcus, his heart pounding, steadied himself. Pain radiated from his leg, but his SEAL training kicked into gear. He locked eyes with Mitchell, whose expression was a mixture of rage and fear, perhaps fear of what Marcus might do next. The entire room watched, breath caught in their throats, as Marcus wrestled with the decision, defend himself or let it go. In any normal circumstance, a blow like that could lead to a savage retaliation, especially by someone as skilled as Marcus. But he had spent years learning discipline, controlling his impulses, and valuing human life. He exhaled slowly, trying to defuse the situation with words. "Officer, I'm not your enemy," he said, voice taut but controlled. But Mitchell was beyond reasoning. He lunged forward again, this time with a clenched fist aimed at Marcus's chest. Marcus had no choice. In a blur of movement, the Navy SEAL deflected the blow, pivoted to the side, and locked Mitchell's arm in a textbook submission hold. The entire maneuver was so quick, so seamlessly executed, that Mitchell found himself flat on the ground in a matter of seconds, his face inches from the polished courtroom floor. A stunned silence engulfed the room. No one could believe what they had just witnessed, a uniformed police officer assaulting a man in open court, and that man, who happened to be a highly trained Navy SEAL, effectively neutralizing the threat in the blink of an eye. Marcus maintained the hold just long enough to ensure Mitchell couldn't retaliate. Then he released the officer's arm and stepped back, hands raised in surrender. "I'm not resisting," Marcus called out, though it was obvious to everyone who the aggressor was. Reporters snapped photos. Camera phones recorded the spectacle. People craned their necks to see. Judge Baldwin, her face flushed with shock and fury, banged the gavel repeatedly, demanding order. Security personnel, separate from Mitchell's department, rushed in, pulling the dazed officer to his feet. Mitchell looked around wildly, clearly humiliated, his uniform dusty from the floor. Michael and Kenneth moved to Marcus's side, making sure he was okay. A hush fell as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Judge Baldwin's voice resonated with authority. "That is enough, Officer Mitchell. You are to be removed from this courtroom immediately. Court security, escort him out now." For a moment, it looked like Mitchell would protest, but the presence of multiple security guards closed around him. With no choice, he allowed them to lead him away, his face twisted in anger and disgrace. Marcus winced, reaching down to rub his shin where Mitchell's kick had landed. Cameras still flashed, capturing every nuance of his expression. The entire country would soon be watching these images, analyzing every frame of the assault and its swift retaliation. Within minutes, Mitchell was gone, and the doors shut behind him. A stunned Judge Baldwin turned her gaze toward Marcus. "Mr. Grant, are you all right?" Marcus nodded. "I'm fine, Your Honor." She pursed her lips. "I need a moment to confer with counsel and my staff. This court is in recess." Everyone remained seated. The adrenaline surging through Marcus's body began to ebb, replaced by a swirl of conflicting emotions: relief that he was unharmed, shock at the officer's brazen attack, and a deep-seated concern about the fallout. How would this shocking courtroom clash ripple through the city? Find out on Dark Stories. In one of the most unlikely places, under the watchful eye of a judge in a room full of witnesses, a man who had worn the nation's uniform was assaulted by the very people sworn to protect and serve. But the drama was far from over. As word spread outside the courtroom walls, the seeds of a larger confrontation were being sown, one that would pull in the media, local authorities, and the court of public opinion. For the first time since he'd left the battlefield, Marcus found himself in the middle of a conflict he never asked for. 10 minutes later, Judge Baldwin returned to the bench. The clamor of whispers in the gallery died away as soon as she lifted her gavel. Her expression was resolute, a stern mixture of anger and determination. After speaking with counsel and the head of courthouse security, she began, her voice echoing in the hushed room, "I have issued an immediate order for Officer Brad Mitchell to be suspended from courthouse duty pending an investigation into this incident. We will not tolerate violence in this courtroom, especially from an officer of the law." A ripple of acknowledgement moved through the crowd. Judge Baldwin continued, "I would also like to commend Mr. Grant for exercising restraint. In light of this disturbance, court is recessed for the day. Proceedings will resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Everyone is dismissed." With that, she banged her gavel, signaling the abrupt end to the day's hearing. Spectators funneled out, still buzzing with shock and speculation. Marcus found himself at the center of a small circle of journalists, their microphones and cameras thrust toward him. "Mr. Grant, can you tell us what happened from your perspective?" a local TV reporter asked. "Did you feel threatened?" another demanded. Marcus glanced around, wary of saying too much. His friend Michael and attorney Kenneth hovered protectively nearby, ready to escort him out. Marcus cleared his throat. "I'm just glad no one got seriously hurt," he said, sidestepping the question of blame. "I respect law enforcement, but what happened was uncalled for. That's all I can say at the moment." Kenneth placed a guiding hand on Marcus's shoulder, steering him past the cameras. "We have no further comment at this time," Kenneth announced, quickly ushering him into the corridor. However, as they emerged into the hallway, the atmosphere felt electric. Crowds of people had gathered, many of them having heard only snippets of what transpired. Some recognized Marcus from the chaotic scene earlier. Others had seen footage on social media. Because in this digital age, it took mere minutes for the video of the assault to go viral. Michael whispered, "That was insane. Are you sure you're okay?" Marcus nodded, though he felt a dull ache in his shin. "I'm good. Let's get out of here." They navigated their way toward the elevators, keenly aware of a dozen camera phones aimed at them. Whispers trailed in their wake, "He's a Navy SEAL." The cop kicked him first. "I can't believe this happened in court," and so on. By the time they reached the ground floor, courthouse security had blocked off a small path, allowing Marcus and his group to exit without further harassment. Once outside, the crisp autumn air hit them like a blessing. But the scene on the courthouse steps was more chaotic than inside. Journalists with large cameras and microphones crowded around. Police sirens could be heard in the distance, though it was unclear if they were related to this incident. Kenneth took the lead again, holding up a hand. "We'll be issuing a statement later. Please allow my client some space." Marcus spotted local news vans with well-known station logos, WSOC-TV and WCNC. He couldn't help the sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of a media circus. Having survived combat deployments, he was no stranger to high-pressure situations. But there was something uniquely unsettling about being thrust into the public eye in such a dramatic fashion. Finally, they reached Kenneth's car in the nearby parking garage. They piled in, shutting out the clamor of reporters. Marcus leaned back in the seat, exhaling a heavy breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Michael turned around from the front passenger seat. "Man, you handled that like a pro." "I would have lost it." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't feel like I had a choice. If I had escalated, who knows what might have happened." Kenneth started the engine. "Marcus, I want you to know that this kind of assault, especially by an officer in a courtroom, will have serious consequences. We should consider filing charges. At the very least, a complaint needs to be lodged with the police department's internal affairs." Marcus rubbed his temples, the magnitude of the situation sinking in. "Let's just get home first," he said wearily. "I need to process this." As they drove away from the courthouse, the tension lingered in the air, a storm cloud that refused to disperse. Marcus's mind swirled with questions. Why had Officer Mitchell targeted him so aggressively? Was it purely racial bias, or did Mitchell have some personal vendetta? And most pressing, what would happen next? He didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was certain: this was far from over. The entire day felt like a battle that had only just begun. What's next for Marcus in this unfolding storm? Stay with Dark Stories to find out. The next morning, the story exploded. Local news stations ran the footage relentlessly, shocking courtroom assault. Headlines on social media blared, "Black Navy SEAL kicked by police officer in open court." Hashtags trended across platforms, and the short clip of Mitchell's kick followed by Marcus's swift defensive maneuver went viral. Pundits debated it. Activists shared it widely, decrying police brutality. Military veterans chimed in, praising Marcus's restraint and condemning Mitchell's actions. Marcus woke up to dozens of text messages and voicemails from friends, former teammates, and even distant family members who had seen the news. As he sipped his morning coffee in his modest townhouse, he couldn't shake the surreal feeling. He had never sought the limelight. His time as a SEAL had taught him to work quietly, effectively, and without fanfare. Now, his face was everywhere, and for all the wrong reasons. He was due back in court that day as Michael's case was set to continue. Kenneth had already advised him to show up but to keep a low profile. If the judge wanted him to testify further, he should comply. Otherwise, minimize contact with the media. According to Kenneth, the district attorney's office was already investigating Officer Mitchell for assault, and a statement from Marcus might be required in the near future. Just then, his phone buzzed again. Marcus sighed, dreading more calls, but this one turned out to be from an old SEAL buddy, Troy Palmer. Troy's relaxed southern drawl came through the speaker. "Brother, I just saw the video. You okay?" Marcus couldn't help but smile at the concern in Troy's voice. "I'm fine. Just a bit rattled. It's weird, man, having the whole world watching." "Yeah, I bet," Troy said, pausing. "Look, I'll be in town next week. We should grab a beer, talk it out." "Sounds good," Marcus replied. "I could use some normalcy." They said their goodbyes, and Marcus felt a flicker of relief. The SEAL Brotherhood was strong. Support was only a phone call away, but he still had to face the day's challenges. Steeling himself, he got dressed in another conservative suit, pinned his trident to the lapel, and headed to the courthouse. The scene outside was even more hectic than the day before. News vans, reporters, and curious onlookers clogged the sidewalks, all waiting for a glimpse of the Black Navy SEAL who had become the talk of the town. As soon as Marcus approached, microphones were thrust his way. "Marcus, do you plan to sue Officer Mitchell?" "Marcus, do you think he targeted you because of your race?" "Marcus, how does it feel to overpower a cop in court?" He tried to remain composed, offering only a polite no comment as he maneuvered through the crowd. A few protesters also stood nearby, holding signs that read, "Stop police brutality and justice for Marcus." He felt a pang of discomfort. While he appreciated the sentiment, he never wanted to become a symbol of anything, certainly not a lightning rod for anti-police sentiment. He respected good cops. He simply abhorred injustice. Once past security, there was a different officer at the checkpoint this time. Marcus hurried to the same courtroom. Michael, Kenneth, and Michael's family sat in the front row, waiting anxiously. Marcus joined them, feeling the stares from other onlookers. Though the assault had overshadowed the property dispute, it still needed to be resolved. Michael shot Marcus a reassuring nod, as if to say, "We're in this together." At exactly 9 o'clock, Judge Baldwin took the bench. The room quieted. She addressed the elephant in the room at once. "Before we proceed with the hearing, I want to address yesterday's incident. Officer Brad Mitchell's conduct is under formal investigation by local authorities, and he will not be present today. I want to reassure all parties that justice will be served. We are here to continue the civil case between the Lane family and the opposing side, and I expect everyone to focus on the legal issues at hand." With that, the day's hearing commenced. Miss Crane seemed more subdued than before, perhaps wary of further drama. The attorneys presented additional evidence, cross-examined witnesses, and made closing arguments. Finally, after hours of deliberation, Judge Baldwin announced that she would issue a written ruling later in the week. The hearing was concluded. Marcus exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. At least that part of this ordeal was over. The question now was what legal ramifications awaited Officer Mitchell and what new storms the media might stir up. What will the fallout be for Marcus and the city? Don't miss the next chapter on Dark Stories, As he and Michael's family prepared to leave, a courthouse security guard approached. "Mr. Grant, the district attorney would like a word with you in her office if you have a moment." Marcus glanced at Kenneth, who nodded. "Go ahead. I'll come with you." Michael stepped forward, concern in his eyes. "You good?" "I'll be fine," Marcus reassured him. "I'll call you later." He followed the guard to the district attorney's office on the second floor. The DA, Linda Marshall, was a tall, composed woman with a reputation for fairness. She motioned for Marcus and Kenneth to sit. "Mr. Grant," she began, leaning forward at her desk, "I'm very sorry for what happened to you. We take assault, especially by law enforcement, extremely seriously. The incident is being investigated, and charges are likely. I wanted you to know that our office will be in touch about any prosecution. Also, if you wish to file a formal complaint, you have every right to do so." Kenneth spoke up. "We appreciate that. As Mr. Grant's counsel, I'll be in touch regarding any next steps." Marcus nodded in agreement, still absorbing the enormity of the situation. "Thank you," he managed to say. "I just want this resolved fairly." The DA gave a small, understanding smile. "I assure you, we'll do everything in our power to ensure justice is served." They left the office with a sense of tentative hope. Perhaps the wheels of justice would turn properly this time. Still, the next few days were bound to be chaotic, filled with interviews, legal paperwork, and the constant glare of public scrutiny. Unknown to Marcus, in the shadows of the local police department, another story was unfolding. Colleagues of Officer Mitchell were scrambling to protect their own. Whispers of a setup circulated. Some believed Marcus had baited Mitchell. Others insisted Mitchell was a rogue actor. The tension within law enforcement itself was growing, and soon it would boil over into something that would test not only Marcus's resolve but the city's commitment to accountability. What hidden forces are at play behind the scenes? Keep following Dark Stories for the truth. Over the next several days, the media narrative evolved rapidly. Many outlets praised Marcus for his calm under pressure, pointing to his military training as an example of discipline and respect. Activist groups saw the incident as yet another harrowing example of police brutality against a black man. Police unions, on the other hand, issued cautious statements about waiting for the full investigation to conclude, but some renegade voices blamed Marcus for provoking Mitchell. Marcus tried his best to tune out the noise. He spent his days at his townhouse, turning off notifications and avoiding the onslaught of news coverage. Instead, he focused on maintaining his physical conditioning. Each morning, he rose early for a run along the quiet suburban streets. It helped clear his mind, reminding him that he was more than the sum of his recent experiences. Yet, trouble found a way to seep in. One evening, just as dusk settled, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. He was in the middle of cooking dinner, grilled chicken with vegetables, when the doorbell rang. Confused and cautious, he peered through the peephole. A young woman with short curly hair and a press badge around her neck stood there, shifting from foot to foot. Sighing, Marcus cracked open the door. "Mr. Grant, hi, I'm Simone Thomas from WCNC," she began quickly. "I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I've been trying to reach you for an exclusive interview. May I have a moment of your time?" Marcus stiffened. "How did you get my address?" Simone held up her hands apologetically. "We have resources to find public records. I promise I'm not here to harass you. I just want to give you a fair platform to speak your truth, given all the speculation out there." Marcus exhaled, feeling both cornered and weary. "I'm not sure this is the right time." "Please," Simone implored. "Off the record, I'm sympathetic to what you've gone through. At least let me ask you some questions, and if you decide you don't want them aired, I'll respect that." After a beat of hesitation, Marcus relented. "Fine, but make it quick." He invited her in, and they sat at his modest dining table. Simone placed her phone on the table, setting it to record audio. She asked gentle, open-ended questions about his military background, the property case, and his initial impression of Officer Mitchell. Marcus answered thoughtfully, making sure not to say anything that could prejudice the ongoing investigation. Finally, Simone leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Marcus, what do you want to see happen? What would justice look like to you?" He paused, mulling it over. "Justice is about accountability," he said slowly. "If Officer Mitchell broke the law, any law, he should be held to the same standard as any citizen. More importantly, I hope this opens people's eyes to the importance of fair treatment. Not all cops are bad, but those who misuse their power should face consequences." Simone nodded, thanked him for his time, and left. Marcus felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. An interview like that could humanize him in the public's eye, or it could fan the flames of controversy. Only time would tell. The very next morning, news broke that Mitchell had officially been charged with assault. His department had placed him on administrative leave without pay. The police chief held a brief press conference, expressing regret over the incident and promising full cooperation with the DA's office. Some local activists praised the swift charges, while others insisted it was only a start, citing other past incidents with no real repercussions. In this maelstrom, Marcus received an unexpected call from Judge Baldwin's office. She was ready to announce her decision on the property dispute case. Michael's family had emerged victorious, with the judge ruling in their favor. Normally, this would be cause for celebration, but the assault overshadowed everything. Still, the triumph brought a sense of closure. Michael and his family were grateful, though they also worried about Marcus's situation. "You have no idea how much we appreciate everything," Michael said over the phone. "But hey, you sure you're okay?" Marcus sighed. "I'm hanging in there, man. It's been a whirlwind, but I'll manage." Little did he know, another twist was around the corner. Word reached Marcus that a group of local law enforcement officers sympathetic to Mitchell was planning a demonstration outside the courthouse, claiming Mitchell was being scapegoated. Even more alarming were rumors that a few extremist elements wanted to paint Marcus as anti-police, stirring up tension at these protests. This new development felt like a punch to the gut. Marcus had always respected police officers. Some of his best friends from the service had gone on to law enforcement careers. The last thing he wanted was to become the poster child for a divisive conflict. But as the demonstration drew nearer, rumors circulated of potential clashes between pro-police groups and activists who supported Marcus. The city braced itself for protests that could spiral out of control. With Marcus at the heart of it all, a quiet dread settled over him. The simple act of coming forward as a witness for his friend had turned into a citywide controversy. What will happen when these tensions erupt? Stay with Dark Stories to witness the dramatic showdown, On the day of the demonstration, the atmosphere around the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County Courthouse was tense enough to cut with a knife. Barricades lined the sidewalks, separating various groups of protesters. On one side, people waved signs demanding justice for Marcus, chanting slogans like "Accountability now." On the other, a mix of police supporters and some more radical elements held signs reading, "Back the Blue and Justice for Mitchell." News crews were out in force. Police officers, many from different precincts, stood guard, mindful of potential violence. The city had no desire for a riot. The memory of previous high-profile cases weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Marcus, against Kenneth's advice, decided to come in person. "I won't hide," he explained, resolute. He arrived at the courthouse in the late morning, once again dodging reporters. His presence sent a ripple through the crowd. People craned their necks to see him, some cheering, others scowling. He felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. The wind was brisk, rustling his neatly pressed shirt. He spotted Michael and Troy in the crowd, giving them a small nod. Troy had come to lend moral support, standing with folded arms and an unmistakable seal posture that commanded respect. Simone Thomas from WCNC spotted Marcus and approached, microphone at the ready. "Marcus, do you have any comment on today's protest?" He paused, scanning the crowd on both sides. "I'm here to stand for what's right. I respect law enforcement when they do their jobs correctly. But I also stand against misuse of authority. This isn't about dividing the community. It's about ensuring one officer who acted irresponsibly faces consequences like anyone else would." His words traveled through the microphone, broadcast live on local channels. Moments later, a group of pro-police protesters jeered. "Traitor," one man shouted. Another brandished a sign with hateful language. The tension ratcheted up another notch. At that moment, a speaker on the pro-police side took the makeshift podium. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in civilian clothes, but with the bearing of a law enforcement officer. "We're here to support Officer Mitchell, a good cop who's been railroaded by anti-police sentiment," he boomed into a megaphone. "He was doing his job protecting the courthouse, and now he's being crucified." A roar of approval rose from that side. On the opposite side, boos and chants of "Fire him" clashed in a chaotic chorus. Marcus felt a pang of frustration. He wanted to shout that Mitchell had attacked him unprovoked, but he knew better than to wade into a shouting match. Instead, he took a seat on a low wall near the courthouse entrance, observing the crowd with quiet concern. Suddenly, a scuffle broke out near the barriers. A few hotheads from each side shoved each other. Police officers rushed in to separate them. For a moment, it looked like a small riot might erupt. Marcus leaped to his feet, eyes darting around for an exit strategy in case chaos ensued. What shocking turn will this protest take? Don't miss the jaw-dropping moment on Dark Stories, That was when the improbable happened. Officer Mitchell himself appeared, striding toward the demonstration, ignoring the pleas of a fellow officer who tried to hold him back. The crowd parted, stunned. Cameras pivoted to capture this unexpected entrance. Mitchell, dressed in plain clothes, wore an expression that was part rage, part desperation. He walked straight up to the microphone on the pro-police side. "I want to address this," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. A hush fell. Even the counter-protesters paused their chanting, intrigued. The tension was so thick it pressed on everyone's chests. Officer Mitchell cleared his throat, gripping the microphone. His eyes flicked to where Marcus stood. For a long moment, time seemed to hold still. Then Mitchell spoke, his voice echoing off the courthouse walls. "I made a mistake," he began, words stumbling out. "I saw a threat where there was none. I lashed out, and I shouldn't have done it." The crowd murmured in confusion, some leaning forward to catch every word. Mitchell continued, faltering but resolute. "I was wrong to kick Mr. Grant. I was wrong to escalate. It was my own prejudice and my own frustration with the system. I took it out on the wrong person. I'm sorry." If a pin had dropped, the sound would have resonated like thunder. It was a public confession, a complete reversal of the narrative some had been pushing. Gasps and hushed exclamations rippled through both sides. Journalists scrambled to film every second, capturing Mitchell's emotional mea culpa. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, disbelief etched across his face. He never imagined Mitchell would admit guilt, let alone do so publicly. The pro-police side was stunned into silence, their champion effectively denouncing his own defense. The counter-protesters also seemed caught off guard, though many wanted accountability. Hearing Mitchell's remorse was unexpected. In the hush, Mitchell locked eyes with Marcus. His gaze was a mix of regret and shame. Microphone clutched in trembling hands, he spoke one last sentence. "I hope you can forgive me." Then, as abruptly as he had arrived, Mitchell placed the microphone down and walked away. The crowd parted again, letting him pass in stunned silence. A moment later, an unmarked police car pulled up, and a plainclothes officer escorted Mitchell inside. He left the scene as quickly as he had arrived. For a beat, nobody moved. Then, an outburst of chatter exploded from both sides, the demonstration fracturing into confusion. Simone Thomas hurried toward Marcus, microphone at the ready, but found him speechless. He stood there, chest tight, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Officer Brad Mitchell, the man who had assaulted him in court, had publicly apologized, contradicting everything his supporters had been claiming. It was a moment of staggering truth, one that would ripple through the community and force everyone to confront the reality of what had taken place in that courtroom. Amid the swirling crowd, Marcus closed his eyes for a second, letting relief wash over him. He'd never expected contrition. Had justice in some form already begun to manifest? The crowd's fervor dwindled, some dissolving into heated debates, others merely standing in awe. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every nuance. Even though the legal process would still run its course, Mitchell's public confession felt like a watershed moment, a critical turning point where the truth could no longer be obscured. And in that brief instant, Marcus allowed himself to hope for true justice, not only for himself, but for everyone who had ever felt the boot of injustice press upon their neck. How will this confession change everything? Stay tuned to Dark Stories for the aftermath. In the days following Mitchell's public apology, the entire tone of the city shifted. Many of the pro-police protesters, feeling betrayed by Mitchell's admission, quietly dissipated. The counter-protesters, while initially buoyed by the confession, were unsure how to proceed. Some argued that an apology alone wasn't enough, while others saw it as a critical step toward reconciliation. The police union quickly distanced itself from the fiasco, issuing a formal statement that condemned Mitchell's actions while reaffirming support for the majority of officers who serve with integrity. The district attorney's office pressed forward with charges, bolstered by Mitchell's admission of guilt. Rumors circulated that Mitchell's lawyers were exploring a plea deal in exchange for leniency, but nothing was finalized. Marcus found himself once again inundated with interview requests. But after careful consultation with Kenneth, he decided to make one final formal statement and then step back from the spotlight. He scheduled a small press conference on the steps of the courthouse, symbolically the place where everything had begun. When the day arrived, a cluster of reporters assembled. Simone Thomas stood among them, notebook in hand, though she had the courtesy to offer Marcus a supportive nod rather than an aggressive barrage of questions. The cameras rolled as Marcus, dressed in a neat black suit, stepped up to a simple wooden podium. Kenneth stood behind him, arms folded. Marcus gripped the edges of the podium, steadying himself. "Thank you all for coming. I won't keep you long," he began, his voice measured but resolute. He paused, scanning the crowd. "First, I want to say that I never wanted any of this attention. My only goal was to stand by a friend in court. What happened with Officer Mitchell was unexpected and painful, not just physically, but emotionally. However, in the wake of his apology, I have come to believe that people can change if they choose to confront their mistakes head-on. I accept his apology, and I support a thorough investigation and fair legal process." A soft murmur rippled through the gathered media. Marcus continued, "I also want to address the broader conversation about police accountability. I served in the United States Navy SEALs. Discipline and respect for the chain of command is paramount. In law enforcement, it should be no different. The vast majority of officers serve honorably, risking their lives daily. We should respect and support them. But we must also hold accountable those who abuse their power. One does not cancel out the other. He looked around, gauging the mood. If there's any lesson to be learned here, it's that transparency, honesty, and accountability are the foundations of trust between a community and its protectors. We have to nurture that trust or rebuild it if necessary. Marcus allowed a slight pause. "Thank you," he said, stepping back from the microphone. Reporters called out questions, but Kenneth quickly signaled that the statement was over. The press conference concluded, leaving behind a resonant sense of finality. As the crowd began to disperse, Simone approached Marcus one last time. "That was a powerful statement. I hope the city hears it loud and clear." Marcus offered a polite nod. "Thank you." With that, he left the courthouse steps, feeling an internal shift. A sense of closure, tentative yet real, had begun to settle in. The swirl of controversy would likely continue for some time: court dates, trial or plea deals, media spin. But at least the truth was out in the open. The officer had confessed, the system was taking action, and Marcus had said his piece. Life wouldn't instantly return to normal, but a path forward was now visible. Marcus had always believed in the capacity for growth and redemption. Ironically, the man who had attacked him proved that change was possible, albeit under extreme circumstances. Back at his townhouse, Marcus reflected on the journey. He had faced battles before in war zones where the enemy was often clear. Yet this confrontation was different, more complicated, and in some ways, more personal. He had stared down injustice and come out on the other side with his principles intact. That night, he slept deeply for the first time in weeks. What does the future hold for Marcus and the city? Stay with Dark Stories for the final chapter. In the weeks that followed, the legal system moved swiftly. Officer Brad Mitchell, aware that his public confession had placed him in an almost indefensible position, negotiated a plea deal. He agreed to plead guilty to a misdemeanor assault charge and resigned from his position with the police department. Part of the agreement also involved undergoing anger management and cultural sensitivity training. There were rumors that he might eventually relocate, hoping for a fresh start somewhere else. For Marcus, the news was bittersweet. While he was relieved that Mitchell was being held accountable, he knew that real healing, for Mitchell and the community, would take much more than a court decision. Still, the fact that a police officer faced tangible consequences for his actions was a watershed moment for many in the city, a sign that perhaps things could change. Local activist groups held discussions about community police relations, and some invited Marcus to speak. He attended a few events, choosing to emphasize reconciliation and the need for responsible policing. Each time, he managed to steer the conversation away from personal vendettas and toward bigger issues of trust, reform, and mutual respect. Meanwhile, Michael's family finally enjoyed their hard-earned victory in the property dispute. They got to keep their ancestral home, a piece of land that mattered deeply to them. Michael thanked Marcus profusely. "If you hadn't been there, who knows if we'd have been able to handle the pressure," he said one sunny afternoon when Marcus visited. They walked the newly surveyed boundaries, the crisp fall air carrying the scent of pine and earth. Marcus only smiled, grateful he could help. As for Marcus himself, he continued with his life. The media spotlight shifted to other stories, as it always does, but the memory of that violent kick in the courtroom and the swift, shocking retaliation remained etched in the city's collective consciousness. In a curious twist of hard karma, the footage of Mitchell's assault and subsequent confession became a training tool for law enforcement in the region. Instructors used it to illustrate exactly how not to handle tense situations and to remind cadets that every action they take is under public scrutiny. In a sense, Mitchell's downfall served as a cautionary tale, helping shape future officers to be more responsible and empathetic. Shortly before Christmas, Marcus received a handwritten letter. He recognized the neat penmanship from the address label, Brad Mitchell. Feeling a jolt of surprise, he opened it. The letter was brief, a page long, in which Mitchell expressed sincere contrition. He explained that he was leaving Charlotte to start anew. He didn't expect forgiveness, but he wanted Marcus to know he was determined to become a better man. Marcus read it twice, then carefully placed it back into the envelope. He sat by his window, looking out at the holiday lights twinkling in the distance. He felt an unexpected sense of peace. In some ways, the cycle of conflict had come full circle, beginning with an unprovoked attack, culminating in a personal note of atonement. The city carried on, shaped a little more by this high-profile lesson in accountability. And Marcus Grant, the Black Navy SEAL who never asked for any of this, found that life sometimes thrusts you into battles you never sought. His test was a crucible of discipline and moral resolve, and he had passed. The memory of that day in court would forever remain, but it was no longer a source of pain. It was a testament to the strength of character, the power of truth, and the possibility of change, even in the most unlikely of places. Just as a single spark can ignite a mighty flame, one moment of injustice can rally an entire community toward truth and accountability. In this story, an unjust kick to a Black Navy SEAL inside a crowded courtroom led to an outcry for justice, both on the streets and in the halls of law. What began as a routine hearing became a turning point, revealing that even those sworn to protect and serve can stumble but also find redemption if they bravely confront their own failings. Now, we invite you to reflect on what you've heard. The true power in this story lies in how we respond to moments of crisis. Do we allow anger to divide us, or do we harness it as a call for growth and change? If you believe in justice, accountability, and the potential for transformation, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Stories. By doing so, you help spread a message of hope and the possibility of a better future for all.